Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, October 29th, 2018. Welcome to the only show on radio which A, isn't on radio, and B, is entirely comprised of executive time. 2 hours of executive time every day here on the air. I just tweet my friends and talk to them and watch television. Minus the watching television part. I watch what appears to be a television, a flickering screen in front of me that scrolls all of the things that you're doing and saying in your various locations, and I get to keep up with you. You get to keep up with me. That's what we're going to do today. It's Monday, another difficult day just because it's Monday, but yes, as I noted in the Morning Post, I'm getting tired of wearing out this line that I end up having to use all the time in my Morning Posts. We are once again under the cloud of a mass shooting. As you all know, I'm not informing anybody of anything they don't know already. Everyone will have heard this news already. And probably won't be, unless there's something amazing and new, probably won't be recapping the story by reading any of the news reports about it. You will all have heard what happened by now in Pittsburgh. And you're on to the next chapter of things, watching Dotard J. Trump quote-unquote react to the entire scene, like by saying, by purposely tweeting in the middle of it all, I am watching the baseball game, and joking at his rallies, none of which he canceled, that he almost canceled it because he was having a bad hair day because it was raining on him. So yeah, that's the stage we're on to now. And of course, everybody watched him have a bad hair day in the rain too, and apparently be unable or unwilling, at the very least, to close his own umbrella. Did you catch that? That clip circulated pretty widely on Twitter and elsewhere, that he carried the umbrella with him up the side. He loves umbrellas. He doesn't like putting it over or sharing with anybody or putting it over Melania or anything, but he walked up the stairs to Air Force One on his way to yet another rally, like his 50th in 2 days, and got to the top and couldn't walk onto the plane with it over his head to save himself from having a bad hair day. The umbrella doesn't fit through the door of the plane, and maybe that's a reason to get a new Air Force One with a wider door so that I can fit my umbrella through it, so that no one can see me not know how to close an umbrella, and instead just drop it at the top of the stairs. That was very weird. Although I guess, if you're used to having a butler around, essentially, then I guess that's the sort of thing that you do. Just drop it there. Someone else will close it. But it spun around up there for a little while before anybody... I didn't see. There was no video of what people decided to do about it. Semi-shocking news this morning, I suppose, outside of the news that we all know has actually shocked us all weekend, is the news from Politico. If you believe them, if you don't think they're fake news, that is. Of course, I don't actually have the story. I have the AMP version of the story because I got it from Twitter. But I think the content is largely the same. Alania Johnson and Daniel Lippman reporting, I think, actually, it is a somewhat important story. I won't be taken as important, though it should be. Headline, 9 hours of executive time. That's in quotes, of course. Trump's unstructured days define his presidency. And, of course, it gets spun into, it gets normalized. What they're saying, of course, is this guy doesn't do anything as president. He doesn't know how to spend his time. He's not interested in learning what he can do as president and how to spend his time. And he wants the presidency to be just like his old life was, and he doesn't care if he ignores, a million other things. So 9 hours. Remember that executive time is the euphemism that John Kelly came up with for the unstructured time that the baby idiot dotard whined and said he wanted in his day. I'm tired of being, told what to do and scheduled, and I want time. And what it means is, and they're very clear about it in the article, his executive time for him is, I get to sit around and watch telly and tweet about what makes me angry that I see on telly and call my friends. I love to call my friends, even if it's on an unsecured phone. And that's what he does. And now, it used to be that they would have, I don't know what they used to say, maybe like 2 hours of executive time on his schedule. This would be on top of the fact that he was never scheduled to leave the residence and be in the office in the West Wing of the White House until like 11 a.m. And if you notice, I rarely see, we're constantly seeing that Trump is having lunch with this one and having dinner with that one. He doesn't do breakfasts, and that's something that's a big deal in Washington, because most people in Washington are super early risers, in official Washington. They're very early risers, and they do a lot of, what they used to call back in the days when I had beautiful hair and lots of beautiful women with me at Le Club in Studio 54. In those days, what they used to call a power breakfast. He doesn't do the power breakfast thing. He doesn't do I don't know whether he eats breakfast or not. I assume there's no meal that he skips, but he doesn't seem to meet with anybody during breakfast. I don't know what he does. Anyway, on top of leaving the residence at 11 a.m., when, that's about 5 hours after most presidents have, been up and being briefed, he then would have 2 hours of executive time built into things too. So into the early afternoon, he'd be doing nothing. And now Politico reports that's expanded. We now have 9 hours a day of executive time. And he also sleeps. I mean, he's not a big sleeper. Apparently, he likes to, he says he sleeps only like 4 or 5 hours a night, which I guess we're supposed to think is, all right, well, you know how he is. He's lying about that. He's sleeping much more. I don't know whether he naps. I don't know what, but he's there. It doesn't matter that he's not sleeping. He retires to the residence very early compared to other presidents as well. On top of which, he's also spending a great deal of time flying to and from and holding rallies at which he just talked. Did you see my election victory? It was so amazing and record-breaking. All of that. So this guy literally is doing zero work. Of course, every appearance he makes, he skips no opportunity to say, we're breaking records, we're doing the most of probably more than any administration in American history. And he's walking around doing zero. This, I tweet it all the time, but this is what they meant over in North Korea when they called him a dotard. And I'm going to, and you might as well stick with that definite dotard, however you want to pronounce it. But this is what they meant. He is, it's worse than being a dilettante. He's not even interested in looking like he does the work or understands the work. He's a dimwit and a hater on top of all that. I mean, we could talk all day about his enormous prejudices and bigotry, but he's a dimwit with no interest in doing the job. And of course, we were assured when he was first elected, as we are sometimes assured when idiots like George W. Bush are elected, he'll surround himself with good people. The presidency is really a staffing position. It's about managing good people, or sometimes picking somebody else to do the managing, and it'll all be fine. And of course, he immediately filled the cabinet with other dotard crooks and idiots and grifters. And so it became, the staff, we'll find veteran staff who could do it. And then there was a big scramble to try and find veteran staff who knew what to do, because half of the veteran staff, White House staff for Republicans, refused to work for him and became never-Trumpers. The other half, even those who had spent the entire election cycle as never-Trumpers, decided to become Trumpers after all and take the job because they figured this idiot doesn't know anything and is interested in knowing nothing. I might be able to run the White House, except he can't run the White House because one of the other things that is his habit is he loves to have his aides fight over what to do, and he can't make any decisions about which one of them to go with. And then he says, oh, well, that's chaos, and I thrive on it. So, I didn't even get to the rest of the story, but honestly, I mean, the lead will tell you all you need to know. President Donald Trump has about 3 times as much free time planned for last Tuesday as work time. Had about 3 hours, 3 times much. Basically, he's working far less than any other president during the actual workday. Plus, he's leaving the residence later, going back to the residence earlier, doing all of these campaign swings and rallies, flying to and from them. And when he's not doing that and not sleeping or eating, he's golfing. This guy is amazing that he thinks, I don't know what to say. He thinks he's the biggest fake news in the world is that he's president. And when I said that they were normalizing it, what I mean is the caption under the photo of him looking particularly dim and incurious on his way into or out of whatever, this portico door here. As a freewheeling president, the caption reads, as a freewheeling president in one of the world's most regimented jobs, and right there the phrase tells you most of what you need to know. In other words, he's not the president. But okay, as a freewheeling president in one of the world's most regimented jobs, Donald Trump appears to be, drumroll, redefining the nature of the role. No, he appears to not be doing the role. It's not. I'm redefining it. Like the rest of the presidents are also going to have 9 hours of executive time. As a freewheeling president in one of the world's most regimented jobs, he's refusing to do that job. That's what's happening here. But, I don't know who's responsible for the caption, but that's just more normalization. Par for the course, I guess, for Politico. But I don't know. I wanted to spend some time on something other than what actually happened this weekend, I guess because you already know it all about what happened. But anyway, much more to wrap up, both about the horrible events of Saturday, the horrible reaction to the events on Saturday into Sunday, and the fact that the president is a wandering, lost dotard moron and can't be stopped. Good morning, Greg. Hi. How are you?
Hi. I don't know about the can't be stopped part. That takes time. But, the Power Post in Washington Post today,
everyone loves power.
They still do power stuff, power lunches, power ties, power
that's
posts.
Basically it.
They still do it.
Still in the 80s. Okay, so that's why they love them so much. They're both stuck in the 80s.
Right, but had a pretty good summary. And they're talking about the October surprises. We had
Power
Hurricane
October.
Michael. We had a Post contributor and Saudi Arabian journalist killed in Turkey amid questions about what the Trump administration knew about it. That involves Jared. We have the migrant caravan from Honduras making its way, earning repeated denunciations from Trump and ginning up hate and fear, which led to just about directly things like a Florida man and Trump supporter was charged with 13 counts after mailing pipe bombs to prominent Trump critics. I'm the one that added the directly. The Post didn't say it, but it did. And then we also had 2 African-American grocery store patrons in Kentucky shot by a white man in what is being investigated as a hate crime. He tried to get into a church, which was locked, so he couldn't get in. So he confronted a white guy with a gun and said, whites don't shoot whites. And then we had 11 people killed and 6 wounded after an anti-Semitic Gab.com commentator attacked a Pittsburgh synagogue. We might be talking about the late Gab.com, by the way.
Yes.
Because nobody now wants to host what is essentially billed as a libertarian antidote to Twitter, which bans people.
Right. Sometimes.
But when you look at it, it's just an anti-Semitic cesspool.
Yes. That is correct.
Yeah, it is correct, unfortunately. So GoDaddy refuses to host them, and PayPal won't pay for them anymore, and so they're in trouble. And people are quitting, so we'll see what happens to them.
Okay. They'll come up with something else. And they'll host it in Russia, like Stormfront did.
Yeah, and the fact that they exist,
right,
and the fact that they do what they do, ultimately not surprising if they did get hosted by Russia, really tells you everything that you need to know along those lines.
Yes, that's a very big part of the story.
And the background, of course, is that we have an election in a week.
Right. I did not forget that. but I did not mention that. So I did forget that.
Mm.
I
So all of that is
actively
going on.
did not, though. Yes, okay.
And of course, we have to digest and figure out, how we react to all of this. And, how do you react to all of this? I would suggest a little Talmud would be appropriate.
Oh, well, I guess it would be.
Not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justify now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You're not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. That's the approach you take with gun fail, and it's the right one. It's not like you're going to fix everything because you had a terrific post and then something happens the next day, but you do what you can with what you got, as they used to say in Brooklyn, and you tackle this little by little. And that's what we all do, and that's what we have to do today. And keep focused, eye on the prize, in terms of the stuff we can do. We can't change Trump, but in terms of stopping him, we can elect a Democratic Congress.
Yes, that would be helpful.
And that happens a week from tomorrow.
Yes, so a week and a day from tomorrow, or a week and 2 days from today, I guess, starts the denials from the White House that the elections were free and fair and need to be undone somehow. And then he'll discover that
it might be a little lighter than that. It might be better than that. It might be as simple as blaming everybody else except himself.
He'll end there, yes. There'll be a period during which he, I think, attempts to do more, and then I think he'll find that things don't really work that way, and then it'll sort of morph into, well, the activist judges are blocking me from undoing this election, but anyway, it's not my fault. I was just trying to clean up everybody else's mess, but okay, fine, I won't. So maybe a hybrid.
So, Trump is out tweeting today blaming everybody else for the massacre except himself.
Practice.
And, it's not as the...
I hope you're saying that next week.
Very insightful Maggie Haberman notes. It's
well,
not
this is genius.
It's not that Trump doesn't get it. It's that this is his plan.
Yes.
To be disruptive, divisive, be your basic all-around asshole, because that's the plan.
She's a real switch hitter, that Maggie Haberman.
Executive time for 9 hours a day, don't really do anything, gin up hate, spend all your time going to Nazi rallies, and then blame anything that bad happens on everybody else.
Yes, his 9 hours hosting Nazi rallies. Just
in these past couple of weeks. I mean, he's just doing that before the election. It's not clear what he'll do after the election.
More Nazi rallies.
So, yeah, but I'm not sure they're going to be 2 a day. So let's concentrate a little bit on the better news, which is what's happening with the election, and then we'll deal with Pittsburgh after the break.
Right.
But there's some excellent essays there, and the purpose and function of some of these terrific essays is to point out that Trump's language, Trump's actions, etc., in fact, do lead to stuff like this.
Yes.
Very clearly seen with the MAGA bomber. That was the cover on one of the tabloids for the New York area, which pretty handles a lot of this stuff. And they noted, one of them, the Daily News, had MAGA bomber, Trump-loving madman, busted in Florida. And then the New York Post had caught red-hatted, and then had a picture of him wearing his Make America Great hat again.
Yes. He's a big Trump rally celeb, this guy.
Steroid-abusing Florida stripper driving Trump van is charged with them bomb spree.
Wow.
That's a pretty good headline.
That's a lot of work in that.
But, yeah, that's who he was.
Well, you're right.
So we have all of that. Adam Serwer, by the way, notes Trump's condemnations of violence aren't convincing his supporters, and again, that's the plan. The president has given the nation no reason to think his recent disavowals are sincere. That's why Andrew Gillum, running for Florida and the next Florida governor, had such a great line. It's, I'm not saying that Trump is stirring up violence, but the people stirring up violence think he's stirring up violence.
Yeah.
And
it's
that's
an
really
all-purpose
the point.
line. It's terrific.
It is, because, it's don't tell me what you say, just watch what you do. And was it Angela Milo? When people tell you who they are, believe them. So there's no reason to think Trump isn't this person. Okay. The disappointing piece is that there are people who will vote for him anyway and vote for his party anyway. And so, again, that brings us to the election. We don't know what's going to happen this coming Tuesday. We do know that the odds and predictions for the Democrats taking the House hasn't changed one bit. In fact, we have lots of stories from places like Politico and Axios and the Trump whisperers that they're trying to figure out how to spin the loss of the House, as you were starting to say, and because they really expect to lose the House. They think they're going to lose 30, 35 seats. They think Nate Silver's prediction is correct. It's not really a prediction. It's the odds. I mean, if somebody has a 10% chance of doing something, then that happens 10% of the time. And so right now, the odds of the Democrats taking the House is rising. It's about 85% right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I hope I don't think we should have to have the election 100 times, though. Because, I mean, we'll win.
His simulations run thousands and thousands of times.
Thank God it's a simulation. We don't have to do this more than once.
Right, exactly. But as of this morning, what do we have? We have 85.1% that's rising. And the average Democratic seat gain is expected to be 39. It could go as high as 60 and as low as 19. The weird part is we know the Democrats are going to pick up seats. That's not even in question. The question is going to be how many.
Yes.
A lot of that's going to depend upon the independent voters and whether young people show up.
And Russia.
Not really too much about them.
I just want to say Russia.
Russia, yeah. Well, it's not Russia. It's not China. It's whether or not, India's vote. We do have an indication a little bit.
India now? What? India.
Do I know? Independent.
Ah. I thought India was meddling.
No. India's staying out of it.
Okay.
They're Switzerland neutral. We have an indication. We have what's going on in Nevada, and that's awfully interesting there. And we have early voting that takes place right up until Friday in Nevada.
At which point
and typically the second week is heavier than the first week.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Now, just to give you an idea, just about 4 years ago, in 2014, a typical midterm, the big Clark County, Las Vegas vote, which is heavily Democratic, on each day, about 10,000 people come out to vote.
Okay.
In the general election for president 2 years ago, that was closer to 30,000. Presidential elections bring out more people in midterms.
Yes.
And this year, we have about 20,000 people voting a day.
That would be in the middle.
So it's in the middle. It's a hybrid. It's somewhere between a typical midterm and not quite presidential levels.
Yes, or twice a typical midterm.
Yeah, but the pattern typically is that Republicans vote early, Democrats vote late. And for example, this week in the second week, it's typical that the Republicans do better on Monday, Tuesday, and Democrats do better Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And often the last day of early voting is the highest total. So when you're looking at these early votes, you have to keep these patterns in mind.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that we've noticed is that in the first week, the rural areas, which are very heavily Republican, were heavily turning out. But it may be that they were cannibalizing their vote because as the week wore on and into this week, Saturday, Sunday, Monday voting, we'll see about today, the rural vote is way down compared to what it was earlier in the week. And the Democratic voting in Clark County is continuing. The swing county of Washoe, we're actually winning by a couple hundred votes. But that's got a 2+ Republican registration. Typically what we try to do is just keep it even or close. So we're doing okay, but it's a very, very, very close race. And 20%, 18 to 20% of the vote so far that's in is, I guess in Florida they call it NPA, no party affiliation. In Nevada they call it other.
Okay. They call it 00.
These are the independent voters that don't have a party affiliation because these early vote tallies are only telling you who shows, not how they vote. One assumes that most of the Democrats vote Democratic. Most of the Republicans vote Republican, but we don't know that. We don't know how the Republican suburban women are voting, for example, so party affiliation alone doesn't tell you that. And polling suggested this year, up until now, that the independent voter in Nevada was leaning slightly Republican. But we don't know that, and we don't know if that's still true, because all of the polling was based on a lower turnout than we're seeing because it's not like 2014. It's not like a typical midterm. It's actually this hybrid thing. So John Ralston, guru in Nevada ran a couple of different simulations based on that, trying to figure out, who really was ahead. And every time he did it, it was like close vote.
Okay.
He's got an early voting blog. He noticed this week the Democrats had the second straight day of a 16 percentage point win in Clark County. Their registration advantage is 13, so they added 3,400 votes yesterday to the Southern firewall, which is now at 25,000. If it gets up to 35,000, that's a good place for the Democrats to be. So the Republicans traditionally rebound in the first part of the second week, and yes, this pattern exists, and then they have their best days on Monday and Tuesday, and then the Democrats have better days Wednesday, Thursday, and the best day of all is Friday. So will this cycle be different? We'll see.
I guess. That's an interesting thing, though, that even in microcosm, it's like a fractal thing. The Republicans are the ones who tend to vote early there, yes. And among those who vote early, the earliest early voters are heavily Republican. And if you're going to vote early,
vote anyway.
Yeah. So if you're going to vote early, Democrats say, you might as well vote late. That is to say, late early.
Well, what you can do is look at these and give you some kind of sense about volume. Volume is up. What you can't do is look at this and say, okay, so now I know how the election is going to turn out. I know how the election is going to do that.
Oh, I just did it.
Right yeah, I know, when you were saying it doesn't work that way. So we really don't know.
I am freewheeling, man.
Right. How this is going to turn out. And when Ralston ran his simulations, it was close. He was facing it before we had the big day for Democrats yesterday. It actually was a little unexpected. And he figured that the vote, according to the numbers, is like 1,000 votes apart for the two candidates.
Okay. Is there any reason for us to tell our Democratic friends in Nevada that today is Thursday?
Go
that
vote.
Work? Yeah, so hurry up. It's almost over.
Don't worry. We're not losing. Don't worry about the numbers. Go vote.
All right. Well, yeah, do that. I don't know why you wouldn't go early, but some people hate Mondays, I guess. And if you're up early, I guess you go. Okay, interesting. We'll be right back with more interesting stuff after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg Dworkin still with us, analyzing the news from the weekend and this morning. Plenty to go around, of course. Don't remember what the hell exactly we were doing a minute ago, but someone's calling in to let us know.
Yeah.
Let's see. We were, when we left off, oh, yes, right, we were talking about, this is during the break. We were talking about polling in Dave Bratt's district, and it looks like, as you pointed out, Spanberger, our Democratic candidate, they're holding her own.
Up by a point.
Yes.
So, the House, again, lots and lots of close races.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my regular reminder that when you have a wave election, what it means is that you have a bunch of close races and they tend to break in one particular direction.
Yes.
So when that happens, one side tends to do very well. So looking at how things are laid out now, all of these, where's the wave? I don't see the wave yet. There's two major misconceptions about that. Olds vote early, youngs vote late. So looking to see where the young vote is, you're wasting your time looking for it now. You're not going to see it now. That's number one. And number two is that if you have a bunch of close races, which are toss-ups, by definition, you can't tell who wins them. So you can only see that wave after the fact.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, That's true. I mean, you'd think that goes without saying, but it's an important point that people aren't elected until after the election.
Yeah. Anyway, so I found somebody on Twitter had tweeted some incredible yard signs.
Yard signs.
Yard signs for Beto in Texas, which were actually rather funny.
Okay.
There were things that it was just a listing things like things that I like more than Ted Cruz.
That's a little.
You
could fit that on a yard sign,
for example.
That's not good in Texas.
Which in Texas is like a big deal.
Yes.
Kansas City barbecue. Things I like more than Ted Cruz is very funny. But I came across this piece in the New York Times called "The Great Lawn Sign War of 2018."
Awesome. I love war.
It's not Nebraska nice, but it's necessary. And they were talking about the fact that the Republican was so obnoxious that this person felt like, they had to do something.
Yes.
They started seeing signs. You never put out yard signs because it's like rude, and in your face to your neighbors and stuff like that. So they put out a Democratic yard sign and people started removing it. So the war just got bigger. For example, this woman writes, in the months after the 2016 election, signs popped up around town that said, "Jesus, I trust you." But pretty much sure nobody named Jesus was on a ballot in Nebraska. Oh. So this year, she talked about the fact that the signs just started disappearing. And within hours, she replaced the stolen sign with 3 new ones and took a few others to houses in other neighborhoods, as residents said, that they take any extra ones off my hands. And in every casual interaction over the past few weeks, I bucked Nebraska nice, which never fit me to begin with, and I find a way to ask the people I'm talking with if they're registered to vote. Some seem offended, and even when they say yes, are you sure? Can you double check? It's not nice, and this time it's absolutely necessary.
Well, it's very interesting, and it's a good another one of those anecdotes that tells you a little something about it tells you a little something about what people feel when they put up a sign because oh my gosh, this obnoxious sign across the street. I need to show people that, it's not just this one side in this neighborhood, and then they put up the sign, and then it gets stolen. You want to get another sign. And if the local campaign office is one of those, signs don't vote, it's a big waste of time, and they make it hard for you to get another sign, it's like discouraging. And you start to think, why won't they let me advocate for their candidate in my neighborhood? And there's a strategy behind it, and it's real, but you do run the risk of having people start to lose their steam. Luckily, this is not an election where anybody would typically allow themselves to be discouraged by something like that, and you only have to wait a week anyway. But signs, they're dumb, but they mean a lot to people for some reason in some places, and, acknowledge that.
Right. So Nate Cohen tweeted yesterday, "We've now polled 14 of the 29 GOP-held Cook Political Report toss-ups over the last couple of weeks.
I think I got
the average result is a tie."
Yes.
That's why they're toss-ups.
Right.
So, again, the whole point, 29 of those. True. And if they break one way, you got yourself a wave that you didn't see coming because the polling didn't tell us that it was going to be a wave. Well, again, I'm just trying to make this point.
Yes.
So waves mean you win the close ones. It doesn't mean you crush everybody by 15 points.
Right. That's true. And once again, just as the guy who graduates last in medical school is still called doctor, a one-vote win is a win. Somebody gets that seat.
Landslide Joe Courtney will always be Landslide Joe Courtney.
Yeah. So there you have it.
I forgot what he won by. It's probably a lot, but we think of it as about 200 votes.
There you have it. So all you need to do is win, and then you're occupying that seat. And then when they count up who has the most seats in Congress or how many seats changed hands, that seat changed hands even though it was a toss-up. And if one guy hadn't been late to vote, it might have been the other way. But, like you say, that's what makes for a wave. Putting yourself in the position to have it turn on that one vote when it should be a 3, 4, 5-point victory for Republicans under normal circumstances. That's the wave part, not the numbers of people that you can confidently say are crushing their opponents right now.
Exactly right. So this last New York Times Siena poll is really interesting. It's Florida, and it's looking at senator and governor. And the interesting part, Nelson, 48, Scott, 44. Close race. We knew that. So Nelson by 4 points. But among those who have already voted.
Mm-hmm.
Nelson leads by 7.
Okay.
Keep that in mind when we get to the who's voting in Florida, which we haven't done yet.
They're
Florida
all
Governor Gillum, 48, DeSantis 43, so Gillum by 5. Among those who have already voted,
yes,
Gillum by 6.
Good.
You'd look at those numbers and say, well, those are pretty good numbers for Democrats. But then you look at the early vote totals and the vote by mail totals from Florida, and you'd say, oh, those are pretty good numbers for Republicans. So how can it be that the numbers look like they're Republican leaning, but the polling says that the votes are actually for Democrats? And that's because, number one, if a Republican suburban voter comes out who's registered Republican but votes Democrat, it's like a Democrat in the Panhandle who votes Republican. You can't tell how they're going to vote based on their party alone.
There is that.
And number two, it's those NPAs, no political affiliation, the independents. You don't know how they're going to vote. So what happens again is Republicans vote early, usually by mail in Florida. So the vote by mail numbers are typically Republican leaning, and that's what we see this year in the 2018 general election. Vote by mail, Republicans 720,000, Democrats 655,000.
Yeah.
So they have about a 70,
Now, voting by mail, it doesn't get there very quickly. So, I mean,
they
Florida
have a 65,000 vote lead there.
But
they've led by more than that in other elections and voted early in person. The Democrats have a slight lead of 436 to 430,000, but that's just starting.
Mm-hmm.
When it was a couple of days ago, Florida has kind of a weird system. They have optional voting for a few days, so some areas do it. Then they have the entire state do it. And unlike Nevada, which finishes on Friday, Florida finishes by Saturday, except for the optional, you're allowed to stay open till Sunday.
Oh.
So there's uneven voting in the beginning, and on the last day, Sunday, there's uneven voting. But in between, everybody gets to vote if they want.
Okay.
And that means that the vote by mail comes in first, that Republicans will have a lead. As the week goes on, more Democrats will vote. And so the vote early total will start to pile up for the Democrats. And at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, you don't really know where it stands.
I guess not. Are they the same in Florida, or is there something unique about old people in Nevada that they vote early?
No. Republicans and older people always vote first.
I see. They eat first.
They always tend to vote by mail. And so in states that provide that, you can expect the Republican vote to come in early.
Yeah.
The part you don't know
but it takes so long to get
are these regular voters or are these people who are voting for the first time who don't typically vote in midterms? What you don't know is how they're going to vote. Mark Caputo's looking at the numbers in Florida thinking this is looking pretty Republican so far. He's right, so far. But with another week to go, you can't really make any conclusions. And that doesn't necessarily match the polling numbers we get of the already voted out of New York Times Siena. So, don't assume anything. Just get out there and do the work is what I'm saying. And don't assume anything about we've won or we've lost. There's nothing about these numbers that say we're losing.
All right, voting on election day is still when most people do their voting, I assume, and that's the ultimate.
Well, it depends where.
Voting.
In Nevada, it's only 20 or 30% of the vote.
Well, that's true. That's a very weird place.
Yeah, so that's why the early voting in Nevada is so important. The Florida voting is a little bit harder to tell. So, again, it's just useful numbers. There's statistical reports about other years. You can look all this stuff up. Florida Secretary of State has this stuff. But the fact of the matter is, it's interesting.
Okay. Well, it is interesting, and I guess it makes a lot of sense. If old people eat dinner at 4:30, they're probably going to vote on Monday.
Well, also, if you're not working.
Yeah, right. That's true. Right. Maybe that's it, too. As younger people who are still working, they want to vote early, but nobody wants to do anything extra on a Monday. And you say, I really got to get to that. But, I'll put it off till tomorrow. And then, I got to do all the things I didn't get to on Monday. By Wednesday, Thursday, maybe they're getting around to voting. Well, I guess that's predictable.
Right.
Just as predictable as Armando letting you know that the Mark Caputo piece is actually terrible and wrong.
Well, he really toned it as Republicans are doing better. Where are the young voters? They vote late. You can't look at it and come to any conclusion at this particular point in time. Armando also points out that the election day vote is about half. So it's bigger than it is in Nevada, for example.
Florida, has more. Okay, so half
But again,
of the people vote
it's tea leaves at this particular point in time. You really don't know who's ahead. It's going to be a close race regardless.
It's decaffeinated tea, though, because caffeine after 9:40 in the morning is too much for us old people.
Right. Steve Shale, as Armando points out, is one of the people that I follow. He was watching Florida football over the weekend, so he didn't have any updates to his blog. But for the most part, things are looking okay for us if we just keep it up, so we'll have to see what happens.
Once again, it comes down to wait for election day.
Yeah. So there's that. And all of that is important. And again, that's the background for if you're depressed about Pittsburgh, what do you do about it? And what you do about it is you go out and vote, and you get people to vote. And if your state is in the bag, then you get on phone banks and you try to get other people to vote from other places. Never stop working, never stop trying.
Yes, that is true. States aren't so much in the bag of anything, of course, this time, it being the midterm elections, although I guess it works for Senate races.
Yeah, you may have a race that's not even happening because only a third of the Senate goes at a time.
That's true, too.
So, House looks good. Senate is still up for grabs, but trending Republican for sure. The worrisome states continue to be North Dakota. I think it's fair to say that Missouri is a worrisome state. Polling there has Hawley ahead by 3 or 4 points, although, again, you can't know till Election Day. Tester looks to be okay. Manchin looks to be okay. Donnelly is in a very, very close race. Nelson looks to be a hair ahead, but again, we just talked about Florida. We'll have to see. Rosen in Nevada looks to be holding her own, and recent polling actually suggests that Sinema's holding her own in Arizona, but there's another place where you can't really tell till the election comes. These are all too close to call. So does the wave carry them? Do the events of the last month that I laid out at the beginning, from the hurricane, which may affect Florida, to the recent shooting, which affects everybody, to the MAGA bomber, to the concerns that Trump's rhetoric and inability to cancel rallies at this particular point in time is just inflaming things, and that's part of his plan. How does all of that play in? Does that motivate people? Well, stick around. In another week, we'll have a much better answer for you.
So, is there another hurricane coming? Or
no, we're talking about Michael and how it affected the Panhandle, which is basically Republican votes.
Right, okay.
And we don't know. Are people too busy with their lives to worry about the midterm?
Typically, yes. In general, still, that is probably the case for more people than the other way, believe it or not.
So I left you some great essays about Pittsburgh and what happened there. And let me just read off a couple for you. There's James Fallows, The Worst of Our Country and the Best, from The Atlantic. There's Washington Post, Julie Ioffe, Perspective, How Much Responsibility basically does the Trump administration have for this?
All of it.
There's in Arc Digital, Nicholas Grossman, the MAGA bomber, and America's warped civility debate. Things are bad, and they're going to get worse. There's Max Boot, Fox News and the rest of the right-wing media can't escape responsibility. I think that's an important one there. There's one from a rabbi in Charlottesville, in Seville, about how all of this looks from there. And there's some wonderful tweet storms from people like Nicole Hemmer, Jer Heat, Yoni Applebaum about the anti-Semitism, including the anti-Semitism that we heard in Charlottesville during the march. Jews will not replace us. They didn't mean Jews were going to replace them. They meant Jews were going to bankroll the caravans.
I see.
And brown people were going to replace them.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, looking at the big picture, we understand that far better now than we did then.
Okay. I was wondering how we're, why would I want to I mean,
well,
it's not that I wouldn't want to replace you.
There's not enough Jews to do that.
I'm not going to do it myself.
But there's plenty of brown people.
Outsource it. Yes, okay. Outsourcing makes a lot more sense for this.
Yep. Anyway, that's my roundup for today.
Okay.
Lots of essays, lots of things to sink your teeth into if you want to.
Why not?
But this is a very serious matter. I'm not excited so much as I am focused on the election for next week. It matters. And, do everything you can. We can do this.
All right. Thanks very much, Greg. I appreciate it. It's, another tough Monday. What can you do?
Yep.
All right.
Yep. That's the news that's fit to print. Take care.
Okay. Thanks very much. We'll see you on Wednesday. Take a day off. Not a bad idea. It really was a hell of a weekend, to say the very least. All right. Let's see. I have a bunch of more. What other messages? Armando was, I guess, still sending us notes about early voting in Florida, which we might as well note for the record here. Let's see. We got through the initial note that Caputo piece is pretty bad, and I was a little initially confused. Greg had said it in a way, in saying Mark Caputo. I was like, Marco Puto? Who's this guy? Is this a new game we're all playing? Mark Caputo, I see. Early vote in Florida will likely be half the vote. We did get that note in from Armando. And then the note about looking to shale, to not like shale like oil shale, but it's Steve Shale. The key number, how many infrequent voters have you brought out, right? Okay, the metric favoring Dems. Caveat, Dems killed it in early voting in 2016, but lost Election Day by 11. So that is an important note. You want to keep the momentum going. In Florida in 2016, Trump produced the missing white voter Trendy wrote about. Okay. And, all right, well worth keeping in mind. Florida's a strange place. All right, well, if we've gotten the gist of things correct then, Armando, I thank you for your input and a good reminder. Let's see. Where do we go from here? Exactly what should we be spending our time on? I think maybe details of the Executive Time story might be a waste of time, but just in case you were curious about what Executive Time actually meant in terms of how he spends it, there's a paragraph or two up at the top that will give you a sense of things. There was the first paragraph there that President Donald Trump, or the second paragraph, had about 3 times as much free time planned for last Tuesday as work time, according to his private schedule. The president was slated for more than 9 hours of executive time, a euphemism for the unstructured time Trump spends tweeting, phoning friends, and watching television. Official meetings, policy briefings, and public appearances, traditionally the daily work of being president, consumed just over 3 hours of his day. The president was slated to spend 30 minutes on the phone with CEOs and make brief remarks at a state leadership conference. He was briefed, and by the way, the 30 minutes on the phone is official, like real work. That's not him gabbing on the phone with his friends, although in some cases I guess it would be. He was briefed by senior military leaders in the evening and joined them for dinner. Again, there you have it, right? Like getting a briefing from senior military leaders, obviously typical part of a presidential day, but other presidents just are like, okay, in between my bodily functions, I will take care of the job of being president. Whereas Trump says he's going to spend so much time watching television and gabbing with his friends and tweeting that he needs to combine the official work with bodily functions. I need to eat. I got to have dinner. I'm going to have a briefing. Make it a dinner. Make it a lunch. I want to eat. This guy plans his life around meals. Apart from an 11:30 a.m. meeting with the White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and again, 11:30 to meet with your Chief of Staff. I'm President of the United States. Need to talk to my Chief of Staff to find out what's going on in the world. What am I doing today? What's tops in importance? That happens at 11:30 in the morning. I mean, in no other workplace on earth could that possibly work. And it doesn't work in this one either. So I don't know why I even put it that way. So there you go. That's apart from an 11:30 a.m. meeting with the White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, his first commitment of the day. So it's not like he says, well, let's hit the ground running. I'm going to take care of a couple of things that I really need to just charge into. I was briefed on yesterday, and then we'll regroup at 11:30 and plan the rest of the day, each day, with my Chief of Staff. That's literally, he does it just like everyone else would. I'll meet with my Chief of Staff to block out the day. How am I going to handle things for the day? It's just that how am I going to do things today meeting happens at 11:30 in the morning. We're off the air. My podcast is sometimes posted. I'm moving on to, I'm trying to send the links to Scott. I mean, 11:30 is just the beginning it's the beginning of the second half, actually, of most people's day. The idea of meeting with your chief of staff as president of the, God, geez, that's amazing. 11:30 in the morning. It's infuriating. That's his first commitment of the day. The rest of his day consisted of open time, blah, 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 tweeting, watching telly, some in blocks as long as 2 hours and 45 minutes. So you can't even have unscheduled time in all one block. I got to break it up with little things that, did we note this again? Yeah, I think we made mention of it the other day that he showed up at the signing ceremony for the opioid bill. We're going to combat the opioid crisis, and again, forgot to sign it, which I wonder whether things would be getting worse or better if he had less of this unstructured time in his day. All right. I mean, I don't know. That's enough. There's a lot to it, and I feel like reading it all because there's little anecdotes in here that are amazing, but we could accidentally spend the whole day on it, and I'll just try my best to move on from all of this and get it done quickly. A review of the week's worth of the president's private detailed schedules from Monday, October 22nd through Friday, October 26th. That's what we're talking about here. Showed that the president enjoyed more free time on Tuesday than any other day that week, but Tuesday's agenda was hardly atypical. And while the notion of executive time and the president's increasingly late start to the day, amazing, has come under scrutiny over the past year, and it really hasn't, not very much, this new batch of schedules obtained by Politico offer fresh insight into the extent to which that unscheduled time dominates Trump's week and is shaping his presidency, which it is not because he's not conducting a presidency here, allowing his whims and momentary interests to drive White House business. He's a dotard, a moron, unfit, incapable of doing the job. The president's time is in many ways his most valuable commodity because it's finite. That's a really generous way of putting it. It says Mac McClarty, who served as chief of staff for President Bill Clinton's first year in office. It reflects his priorities. It reflects what he's trying to get done with the country. And I hope that Mac is saying here that a president's time is his most valuable commodity because it's finite. A president's time reflects his priorities and reflects what that president is trying to get done with the country. And so what it means is Trump is not doing anything. He has no priorities, and he doesn't value the job. Now comes, this is it. This is where the caption came from. As a freewheeling president in one of the world's most regimented jobs, Trump appears to be redefining the nature of the role. That would, of course, mean that the people responsible for that line are Daniel Lippman and Eliana Johnson, our writers of this piece, unless the AMP version is misleading me here. Or rather, I guess the Pocket version, because I realize now I've been reading the Pocket version instead. Switching over here, just trying to make sure I don't miss anything. Trump, by contrast, as a freewheeling president in one of the world's most regimented jobs, that whole baloney thing, redefining the nature of the role, as in, I don't have to do it. Past presidents were disciplined in their scheduled time, squired from meeting to meeting, event to event, from the moment they arrived in the Oval Office until they headed up to the residence at night. Now, don't make any mistake about this. It's not that Trump is like, I don't like this being squired from meeting to meeting or event to event. It's that he doesn't like doing meetings or events. He's still squired to everything, including, darling, you have to turn around and go back and sign the bill that you came here to sign. That sort of squiring. Or I'll take care of the umbrella. Don't worry that you just dropped it, you moron. I'll go fix it. Trump, by contrast, enjoys huge blocks of unscheduled time. All they're saying here is that instead of being squired from meeting to meeting in tightly packed increments, one after the other, he does one meeting and then goofs off and then does another thing and then goofs off and then goofs off from the goofing off and then goes to another thing and then has lunch. And somebody, leads him around on a leash from one thing to the next. So, Trump, by contrast, enjoys huge blocks of unscheduled time in which he can do as he pleases. He is hardly the first president to have an erratic schedule. That's probably true. Both Clinton and Jimmy Carter were known to make middle-of-the-night phone calls, and every president has kept different hours. That's fine. George W. Bush was an early bird. Barack Obama, a night owl. Barack, I'm now calling him. I've changed back over to some sort of Midwestern person here. But even Trump allies who say the president is always working concede that the Trump presidency is uniquely defined by his downtime, when his short-term bugaboos become the drivers of his agenda, rather than any long-term vision, of which he has none, I might add. He might read something in the paper, and immediately you'd get an impromptu meeting on trade. A person familiar with the president's scheduling said it's just more impromptu than like a month in advance you have a policy time set that you're going to work up to. Some White House aides insist that the president is productive during these open stretches, calling lawmakers, cabinet members, and world leaders, and scheduling meetings rather than simply watching television in a private dining room off the Oval Office. One aide even described Trump as a workaholic, except he doesn't know what work is, and so there you go. I mean, I think the aide has no idea what work is. That's the kind of person that comes to work for him. People were pampered. But the president's official commitments last week began no earlier than 11 a.m., according to the schedules obtained by Politico. And on Tuesday, in the midst of a potential serial bomber and 2 weeks ahead of the midterm election, they didn't start until 1 p.m. They're getting later and later. Trump's work activity also reflects much more time spent in the performative, that's right, aspects of the job. And remember, performative stuff has a bad reputation around here given the Kavanaugh stretch of things. But the performative aspects of the job, like signing ceremonies and media interviews, than on the grunt work of policymaking, of which he does none. There's more. Maybe we'll just leave it there. I don't know. We'll be back after our 1 minute break at the top of the hour to discuss a little bit. Well, we're going to have to move on from this. We don't have executive time all day. We can't just stick around here and do whatever the hell we want, like say Trump's an idiot, which he is. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Time to shift gears. There's a lot more. It's a juicy story because it allows us to get angry and yell about what an idiot the president is. I'm going to resist the temptation, not because I think it's wrong to spend your entire day, possibly your entire life, screaming about what an idiot Donald Trump is. I'm not certain that's a waste of time, but we have very limited time here on the show. And there's many other things about which perhaps you would like to scream, and we can get to those. I just think that there's more to do. We're way behind. Let's move on to this. I had hinted at this at the beginning of the show, and we got to talk about Russia because it's got a lot to do with this. I suppose today is a day that a lot of people are going to spend time analyzing the events of Saturday in Pittsburgh, and this is the part I want to look at. What the hell's going on? What happened? Why did it happen? That's the part that's up for debate. But the president's side and the Republicans in general are spinning furiously by most accounts the shooting, including, of course, pointing out, for instance, that apparently the shooter, active on social media, gave them what they needed. That is to say, at some point he said he was not a Trump fan. I don't know if he said whether or not he voted for him or whether or not he said he would vote for him again the next time or anything like that. But it also seemed obvious that he was not a Trump fan because he felt Trump was not as right-wing as he was and as serious about doing something about the important threats to the world like Jews as he was. And he's probably right about that. Donald Trump is not serious about doing anything about anything. Not because, so he's not less committed to anti-Semitism than the shooter because he has strong feelings about the impropriety and immorality of anti-Semitism. It's just that I don't do anything. I mean, don't get me wrong. I hate Jews plenty. I just don't feel like doing anything about it. But I also have a soft spot for them, and this I really believe is true. A lot of people were saying, he did backpedal from his hardline stances a little bit and treated the shooting with a little bit, tiny, not by any means sufficient, but a tiny sliver of, what would you say? He clearly knew that he was supposed to treat it, at least initially, a little bit more gently than most. I mean, he abandoned it right away and went straight to, I'm watching the baseball, and who cares? And anyway, Republicans are awesome, and it's the press's fault that did all this stuff, that this happened, et cetera, et cetera. So, but there was a pause there in which he said, all right, I'll read, it's time for me to read the prepared statement on this thing. And that, I think, some people said, well, that shows that he knows, he's scared of this thing, perhaps. It would be an uncharitable read of why he was backing off a little bit. I really think that, he works in a much more personal realm, that he doesn't have the ability to view things more expansively than that. And I think that he knows, like some people probably said, well, surely he's going to say something and do some sensitivity stuff here to be PC about it. Because Jared and Ivanka, because Ivanka's married to Jared and is converted to Judaism, and my little grandchildren are little Jews, so whatever. I don't know whether it was that so much as it's probably on par with him, but maybe just a little bit more important than I think he's going to hear about this. If he didn't, read the prepared statement and say it's a tragedy and we all have to be so worried and sensitive, blah, 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 about this stuff. If he didn't say it, I think he'd hear about it at Mar-a-Lago this season. It's getting to be winter season and Mar-a-Lago season, and he's going to be down there. And, I don't know what the ratio is down there, but he's not a practicing anti-Semite when it comes to taking money from local wealthy Jewish people to join Mar-a-Lago. So I know that there's, a sizable contingent of wealthy folks who also happen to be Jewish who are in the area and who are spending their winters there too, if not living there full time, and they're going to be at Mar-a-Lago, and he's going to be approached, and one of them is going to tug him on the sleeve and say, Mr. President, I just want to say, it's really important that you come out strongly against this anti-Semitism. Oh, yeah, absolutely, you're correct, no doubt about it. You're absolutely right. It's a horrible, horrible thing. I'm so glad to hear you say that, because sometimes I defend you, Mr. President. Some of my friends, and she may make mention that she's Jewish, some of my friends at the shul or anywhere, my mahjong partners, whatever, they say horrible things about you. And I defend you because I say, look, you take the good with the bad. I don't agree all the time with every single thing that you do. You know that. I'm an independent, Mr. President. But I tell them, it's great. Look what he's doing in the economy for the taxes. And we all agree that it's a good thing in the taxes. Even my Democrat friends believe that you're good on the taxes. Because I won't lie to you, they're very wealthy women. But anyway, so, I think he could have his ear bent on this stuff at Mar-a-Lago. I assume Ivanka says something about it. And I don't think it ever comes down to well, come on, Daddy. I mean, that could be our shul. Me and Jared, we could be a temple and somebody could target us. And then they both, ha, just kidding, because our temple is guarded by the Secret Service. It's the rest of the temples you got to worry about. And, yes. Oh, by the way, I guess we might as well make brief mention of the fact that, of course, immediately he's the first thing out of the box that when he's answering questions about the shooting is, armed guards. Everybody should go to church. Everybody should go to temple armed. And by the way, he made a point, I guess he could hardly avoid making the point of saying that churches and synagogues, because this one happened in a synagogue, should either have armed guards. He didn't say necessarily that congregants should go to their places of worship armed, but that's another popular option among the NRA types. And yeah, by now everybody has pointed out too, although it did occur to me early on, and when he was saying, well, they should have armed guards. Like, we just heard that he shot 3, and I think the number may be up to 4 now, shot the cops that responded. An armed guard, I know a little bit about what congregations consider when it comes to thinking about security. And basically, even if you actually said, yeah, that's a good idea, we're going to go along with the president and the NRA on this one and get an armed guard, you're talking about a rent-a-guard with a pistol at most, somewhere in the building. And when your shooter shows up with an AR-15, the guy just gets torn in half. There's no resisting an AR-15 crazed shooter, often who comes in with body armor, et cetera, et cetera. An armed guard doesn't do very much. Armed guard might be helpful in deterring spray paint graffiti if he happens to be on the grounds at the time that the vandal shows up. Maybe he'd be good at that. And I'm sure somewhere there's a hero that will, manage to stop a shooter by happenstance with his sidearm. But basically, an armed guard doesn't do you any good. And you know what? The next time there's an armed guard somewhere, whether at a place of worship or otherwise, and a shooter comes in with an assault rifle or 2 or 10 and body armor and kills the guard, then it'll be like, well, that's clearly ineffective. Maybe all the parishioners, all the congregants, I guess I should say, to be more inclusive, should bring their own weapons, which of course means we're about this close, rhetorically speaking, to Donald Trump himself is eventually going to have to, turn around and walk the other direction away from saying, even Muslims, they should all bring assault weapons and gather in mosques all around the country, and that would be a good thing. That'll do him in with his MAGA crowd, of course. And they won't bother attacking him about saying that. They'll just say, oh, no, that doesn't apply. We said all legitimate religions should be able to guard their places of worship. That is a terror cult, and you shouldn't be allowed to bring weapons there. That is how they will justify excluding Muslims from the generalized call for arming themselves in their places of worship. But that wasn't what I meant to spend the second hour on. I don't know how I got there, but it was important. I can recognize that. Here's what I want to talk about. Russia. How did it happen that this guy who says he's not a Trump fan, remember we were talking about that, shows up and does this shooting? And the basics of it jump out in the middle of this Ben Collins tweet storm, a reporter for NBC News, though he seems to, is he more MSNBC than or is he? I don't know. I guess they're all NBC reporters. Anyway, I caught on to his tweet storm in the middle, I guess, and it's not that that's the part that was important to me for transitioning to the story. Then I'll go back and read you the whole thing. The one that really grabbed my eye was this one. When you go to find the shooters, the guy's name is in here, whatever. When you go to find the shooter's favorite Jewish caravan conspiracy image on Google, right? Okay, I've skipped the step here, but I think everybody is aware by now that the guy shot up the synagogue basically because he was basically, according to his social media footprint, motivated to take what he saw as direct action against the Jews that were conspiring to organize, pay for, and otherwise facilitate the caravan. The caravan, everybody. Or perhaps it's even this kind of caravan, the minor key, even scarier caravan. Of course, they're doing everything they can to scare people about this, and it continues even post-massacre, of course, and we could touch on that too. But the idea here is, okay, George Soros is paying for the organization of the caravan. And you heard that brought up last week. And Congressman Matt Gaetz from Florida, who is a murderer, why not just put it that way? He's certainly should be an unindicted co-conspirator in this conspiracy to commit murder. Was one of the first ones out of the box on this thing, and he's not alone by any means. We keep saying, or rather, I guess the punditry keeps saying that it's a fringe thing that that's going on here. That only the crazy fringes of maybe the Republican Party, but surely alt-right conservatives are the ones passing around this stupid rumor, which is that George Soros and other international globalist Jews are the ones paying for the caravan, whether because they're idiots and looking at video of something, possibly whatever it is happening in Honduras, that looks like money being given out and whatever, and then turning that into, this is George Soros paying them to do it. And, okay, so that metastasizes and is circulated around. But now, so Matt Gaetz is saying it. But also, if I am not mistaken, I thought I saw it being tweeted around that even like Chuck Grassley was saying, I think that actually is true. I mean, Lou Dobbs, the lunatic from Fox News, of course, has said the same thing and has deleted his tweets saying not only his thing that day was that the bombs from what's-his-name down in Florida were all fake. Fake news, fake bombs, et cetera, et cetera. But if I'm not mistaken, out there somewhere is, I should look for this, it's Grassley. He's like saying, oh yeah, I think it's true, is what I remember seeing. Where was this thing? Now I can't, I can't find it offhand, but I guess I should just search for Grassley and see what mentions are out there. Oh, there we are. His, let's see. So, I guess here's even a quote. BuzzFeed News has this story. Should I open up the BuzzFeed News story? Republicans aren't commenting on their George Soros attacks after Soros conspiracy theories played into a violent week. That's Lysandra Vila saying this one. Here it's subheaded with the House Majority Leader. That would be Kevin McCarthy's comment. We cannot allow Soros, Steyer, and Bloomberg to buy this election. It's reserved for the Kochs to buy this election and Donald Trump and his friends to buy this election. But this, I guess, is where the story comes from. All right, they begin by saying earlier in October, Representative Matt Gaetz, Florida Republican, tweeted about the caravan of migrants, yada, yada. We know all about that one. We've read it before. That Soros is behind the caravan has been a widespread conspiracy theory spread on Twitter, even by a Campbell Soup lobbyist. And I had no idea that you had to lobby in favor of Campbell Soup or that they would even employ such a person. If it's so damn good, what do you need to lobby over? But I guess what would be really fascinating is if they send their lobbying messages spelled out in alphabet soup letters. That would be worth doing. That's a job worth having, I think. Anyway, he left the company earlier than planned. Huge plan on who's going to be lobbying for Campbell Soup. McCarthy suggested it, quote, could be politically motivated in an effort to affect the election. This idea of paying for the caravan makes no sense, of course. The shooter and the suspected shooter, even though he did it, in the Saturday Pittsburgh synagogue shooting, blamed Jews for helping members of the caravan and had a history of anti-Semitic rhetoric. We know that to be the case as well. Where's the part here about, what's his name? Grassley. Yeah, there it is. I tend to believe it. about this conspiracy. I tend to believe it, Senate Judiciary Chair Chuck Grassley said earlier this month when asked if he believed Soros was paying the Kavanaugh protesters. Okay. So that's a different one. I was hoping against hope that, well, who cares? I mean, I hope he was saying that he believes Soros was paying the people in the caravan so we could get rid of Chuck Grassley forever. But apparently it is that, he was willing to say he believed that Kavanaugh protesters were being paid by Soros. I guess they probably never actually got to him on whether or not he believed that Soros was paying the caravanners as well. But luckily we have Matt Gaetz doing that work instead. Okay. So, that's important part of this. But now I can get you back to where I was going with the Ben Collins comment. When you go to find the shooter's favorite Jewish caravan conspiracy image on Google, the most common terms, like Caravan Star of David, I guess is what you should be Googling for if you want to see what the fevered minds are passing around, point you to USA Really. That is a website, by the way, a Russian propaganda site funded by the Kremlin. In other words, his most shared meme about the caravan, proving in his mind that George Soros and international globalist Jews were financing the caravan, comes from this one picture, which, you can find it out there. And I don't know. I don't even know how they spotted this thing. It is a picture of a truck, like a flatbed truck. Well, it's got a little bit of a bed to it, that purports to have been taken in Guatemala, of people, hopping on board this truck to, I guess, so they don't have to walk the entire route. I don't know whether people are hitchhiking in this caravan, I guess. And whenever a vehicle capable of carrying people comes by, it picks up whoever, and out of the kindness of their heart, or under the influence of Soros money, depending on how you look at it, people are, I'm driving as far as whatever town. You want to ride? That's north. Let's go. And this particular truck, they're zooming in on this truck, and it doesn't really look like, I don't know, maybe it's Photoshopped, maybe it's not, I have no idea, but they're passing it around because on the right-hand side, the passenger side of the cab of this truck, just behind the passenger side door, it looks like, is what appears to be a six-pointed star, the Star of David, symbol of Judaism. And that's all it takes. I don't know whether the driver of the truck is Jewish. I don't know if the driver of the truck is a sheriff. Remember what these are supposed to be sheriff stars. Now they're Jewish stars again, just like we said they were, but not last time. We caught them out with the Jewish star thing, and they said it was sheriff stars. Now they're back to the Jewish stars. And okay, so there's apparently a decal on this truck, and so therefore international Jewish conspiracy, blah, 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 so very tenuous, obviously, and very stupid. But the point here was the main source, or perhaps the original source of this footage, and or at least the freeze frame of it that points to, with a big, superimposed arrow, to the Jewish star that's supposedly on this truck cab, comes from USA Really, a Russian propaganda site funded by the Kremlin. And he says you can read more about their operation here, and provides us with a link to a story, and perhaps we should look at it. But here's the totality of the thread. Ben Collins begins his thread with news from me. Pittsburgh synagogue shooting suspect threatened Jewish groups, pushed migrant caravan conspiracies. Thread about a really specific migrant caravan conspiracy that the shooter believed below. He reposted the image, a screenshot of a Star of David on the side of a truck purportedly in the migrant caravan. We don't even know that is the case, several times before the attack. It's from a Fox News segment about the caravan that didn't mention the decal. So where does he get the idea that it's Jews behind it because of the decal? Well, it's because he posted conspiracy theories about this image a lot. He became convinced Jewish-backed groups were launching an invasion through the caravan. The image and conspiracy were extremely prevalent on Gab, which we heard about a little bit earlier, 4chan, which we know plenty about, conspiracy YouTube, and parts of Twitter. Then you find out it comes from USA Really, originally, which is to say that what's happening here is, once again, what has motivated this loon to go and do this shooting, and again, his social media footprint indicates that this is the case, that he basically says, look, I don't care what you say anymore. I'm going in, after posting this thing over and over. And it's clear that Jews are behind this caravan. The caravan, I have, come to believe, is a huge danger to the United States. That's thanks to the rhetoric of the president and others. I've come to believe that all of that is caused by Jews, which I've come to believe thanks to the rhetoric of Matt Gaetz, murderer at large. And I'm going to go do something about it. The rest of you are cowards, essentially, is what he was saying. I'm going to take some direct action to do something about this. So, yeah, that's just, again, God damn it, the Russians, again, behind this stuff, all they're doing, I mean, essentially, they've got a plan to say, let's feed the worst possible mental poison to America's most deranged people, and put the rest of the populace, if we can't, who cares if we can convert them all to believe this? I just need them to be scared of maniacs and or supportive of maniacs, so that there's more maniacal attacks coming. And already the right-wing Gab and 4chan type places are filling up with, this was a great idea, we should do more of them, who wants to go next? And, 99.999% of them are, thankfully, too afraid / sane, possibly, to actually do such a thing. But if you have enough people, 0.0001% of them is enough. You only got to motivate 1 or 2 people to do something like this, and you got a real problem on your hands. So, anyway, Ben Collins's piece points to this NBC News report from when? June of this year, June 2018. This man is running Russia's newest propaganda effort in the U.S., or at least he's trying to. And I think we might have read about this guy, maybe even read this article. Alexander Malkovich tried to throw a rally at the White House, but nobody showed up. So he wasn't that good at getting masses of people out, but maybe he is good at motivating lunatics to take independent action. Ben Collins, of course, was a part of the reporting of that piece. That's how he knew about it. Also, on the byline there, Brandy Zadrozny. How in-depth should we get with it? How long should we go with it? Well, we'll see whether we feel like we're being informed here. But the basic idea of it is there's a new game in town. Alexander Malkovich stood outside the White House on Thursday, braving the 85-degree heat in a skin-tight long-sleeve shirt with Che Guevara's face emblazoned on it, because he's a hipster, you see. Thursday was Flag Day, as well as the birthday of Malkovich, Che, and President Donald Trump. And he was leading a very small political rally. Che and Trump. Makes sense, right? No, none at all. But this wasn't one of the typical protests that crop up on Pennsylvania Avenue. Malkovich sits on Russia's Civic Chamber Commission on Mass Media, an official arm of President Vladimir Putin's government. He was there to promote his new Russia-funded English-language news site, USA Really. Wake up, Americans. Like most of Russia's efforts to manipulate U.S. politics, the website traffics and content on divisive issues, such as promoting secessionist movements in the U.S., the same kinds of activities that caused a furor when they were exposed as having influenced the 2016 presidential elections. Malkovich's hopes of generating a similar furor now, 2 years later, seem to have degenerated into self-parody, however. Not all the way. Instead of actors with signs and musicians playing symphony music, as Malkovich had envisioned, he stood among tourists and Free Tibet protesters with only his business partner, Alex Dolgonos. It's hot out here, but it's much hotter in some of those rooms we've been kicked out of, Malkovich said. What does that mean? No one knows. Russia's information war has taken on a variety of forms. The country backs some robust organizations like Russia Today and Sputnik, which resemble mainstream news organizations but have been recently forced to register as foreign agents with the Justice Department. There's the well-known efforts to manipulate Facebook with fake news and political groups. There's even a website that offers millennial-friendly news videos. And I guess this is supposed to be it here. USA Really is the latest in these propaganda efforts and maybe the most peculiar. See if we can find out why in the next minute or two, and then after the break. The operation is small and does not seem to mind attention from U.S. media. It also didn't try to obscure that its efforts included trying to pay actors to attend its rally. Part of the trolling, I guess. Malkovich's organization, at least thus far, highlights that not all of Russia's operations are particularly well conceived. That's good news, except it doesn't matter. I mean, I think a lot of the sloppiness is meant to be trolling in and of itself, just an extra layer of it. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think I'm going to continue with this piece about USA Really. Where did we leave off? We were talking about the fact that they're actually pretty sloppy, and they're very actually, if not upfront, they're very they're less than concerned about being found out hiring actors to show up at their rally. And I think it's just, I guess in their mind, it's not worth the effort to try to conceal it. And besides which, it's additional trolling. It's almost like we should absolutely be identifiable as fake news, so that when Trump says things like he said this morning, oh, you know, it's the fault of the fake news. Fake news must end. And then we'll all spend our time saying, but look at USA, really, they're fake news. They are even admitting that they're fake news, but they're pro-Trump. It's fake news is Trump thing, not anybody else, or at least primarily a Trump thing, as opposed to anyone else. And, and we'll say the hypocrisy of it all. And Trump himself will ignore that. And the trolls will spin it and say, no, you're the one with fake news. And some people will earnestly respond to that and spend their whole day arguing about that with bots, trolls, AI figures of one sort or another. And I think that's actively part of the plan. Let's make it so obvious that we're fake news that 50% of our opponents spend all their time trying to convince, I guess, us and maybe other people that we are fake news when we readily admit we're fake news. And the other half perhaps will argue about us on substance. But to the extent that we can take half of our critics out of the game arguing about something we don't care about, that's just good for us. I think that's what's happening with these guys. Malkovich's organization, at least thus far, highlights that not all of Russia's operations are particularly well conceived. His organization has been turned away from venues at which he'd hoped to host events and rallies. His organization was removed from one venue where the group was set to hold a discussion on, quote, how to stop fake news. I don't think it could be any clearer but that they are engaging in an additional level of trolling here with this. Malkovich filed a permit application with the Capitol's Office of Cable, Television, Film, Music, and Entertainment to rally in front of the White House lawn on Thursday. The permit called for actors to appear... Just said it outright, called for actors to appear in front of the White House holding signs along with a group of up to 7 musicians to, quote, play symphony music in the background. Why, I'm not sure, but whatever. Possibly just to show that money was being wasted on the rally. I mean, there's a certain point at which that is additional trolling by itself, too. There's so much Russian money being poured into this effort that they're able to waste it on having symphonic music played at their fake rally with actors in it. And again, there will be people who will think that, I guess, who could possibly be smugly satisfied with themselves for having, quote unquote, discovered that this was the case and exposing that this was the case, when in fact USA really doesn't care about it at all and is kind of hoping that this would happen. I would rather you spend your time on, quote, exposing us as fake. The general concept, the article continues, public inquest against fake news and or dishonest journalism, especially on the Flag Day, the permit reads. During filming, roughly 10 to 15 actors holding signage marked real news versus fake news are staged in view of the White House, exchanging commentary and demanding that the media give the public the, quote, truth. The rally, however, never happened. Malkovich stood outside the White House at the time of the rally with Dolgonos, a Canadian businessman who applied for the permit and said he was providing Malkovich with legal help in launching his media operation. Around them, tourists snapped pictures and some people waved American flags. Malkovich told NBC News that the rally had been called off because he had been denied a permit to film. In a blog post earlier in the week, Malkovich claimed the local police and special services, including the CIA, have been informed of the neighborhood with Russian journalists. That doesn't even make any sense because he can't speak English. And that the Metro Police had categorically denied the permit. A spokesman with the D.C. Metro Police told NBC News that USA Today never applied for a permit and suggested reaching out to the U.S. Park Service, which also has jurisdiction over rallies outside the White House. The Park Service did not respond to requests for comment. USA Really has a variety of links to Russia. The domain name for USA Really was registered privately from a Russian address and promoted by the Federal News Agency, which is allegedly owned by Putin's chef, that guy, you remember him, restaurateur oligarch Yevgeny Prigozhin, who was among 13 Russians indicted by special counsel Robert Mueller for their campaign to sow discord before the 2016 election. Since April, the jobs section of the Federal News Agency's website has been recruiting English-speaking journalists for USA Really. USA Really's month-long campaign in the U.S. has hit roadblocks in recent days, according to a statement of grievances from Malkovich posted on the Federal News Agency website. Facebook removed USA Really's page, and according to Malkovich, Twitter has imposed restrictions on its account. Malkovich repeatedly ignored or deflected questions about USA Really's funding. The new site appears to be a much lower quality effort than content from past Russian propaganda social media ventures, some of which have been shared by advisors of President Trump and even his son, Donald Trump Jr., in the days before the election. Riddled with typos, USA Really's stories often push divisive content about race and gay rights, like one lambasting the FBI's Twitter account for recognizing LGBTQ Pride Month. Are there any congrats for the straights? No, the post reads. Another post from the same week stokes outrage in a headline with mangled grammar. A high school teacher was fired after forgot the name of transgender student, it reads. And I see the typo, obviously. But yeah, that's the sort of thing that people will pass around as, you know how there's such snowflakes out there. This high school teacher forgot the name of a transgender student, and he accused him of doing it because he was transgender, and so they fired him to be sensitive to Okay. Malkovich told NBC News that he's working on his English and that he's staffing up for bureaus in New York and Washington. Why? He also said USA Really wouldn't repeat troll farm tactics of impersonating Americans on social media while denying knowing anyone involved in the embroiled Internet Research Agency. We want to do everything legal, he said. Malkovich said he was enjoying his time in Washington despite being disappointed at what he called Red Scare books in places like the gift shop of the Spy Museum about half-mile from the White House. I see all of these stories about how 10 Russian hackers changed the election. Where's the CIA? Where's the FBI? They can't stop 10 Russian hackers, he said. It's a reasonable question, I guess. Malkovich chatted amiably about his venture, but under the unrelenting heat, he grew agitated when asked about the Internet Research Agency. I like America, but I keep getting into problems with all of these officials, Malkovich said, and now all of these people asking about the Russian trolls. Because, of course, he is one. Anyway, I just wanted to, that was an interesting backgrounder on, I guess, maybe the next generation of low-budget Russian trolls, and I think it's an interesting concept, the idea of doing this for less and then adopting the problems with a cut-rate troll farm as features, not bugs. The fact that it's full of errors, the fact that our news is clearly fake, the fact that we're even open about using actors is only meant to siphon attention and energy away from fighting what they're doing at their core, which itself is meant to be a distraction from our fighting for, I guess, regaining control of our own country. The fact that if we spend time rooting out Russian troll farms, they'll just replace them with other Russian troll farms. But hopefully you will have managed to vote somewhere in between all of that. Anyway, I guess that's not new. Certainly that piece isn't new, but I thought it was interesting to note the connection between the caravan conspiracy theory and the shooting and the role that paid Russian trolls are playing in providing the material necessary for people who don't believe they've lost their minds, but are in fact right-wing conspiracy theorists, to get to the point where they're willing to do stuff like this. Two possible directions to turn in from here, and or three, or four, or five. I'm not even sure how many to go with here. Let's briefly detour to a Washington Post piece from this morning that I think we can dispense with rather quickly. Russian disinformation on Facebook targeted Ukraine well before the 2016 election. It is a piece by Dana Priest, also on the byline here, but not linked, interestingly, James Jacoby and Anya Borg, I guess, of Frontline PBS. So a joint effort here. You probably know about this. Let's see. How long is this article? It's fairly lengthy, but we'll give you the gist of the reporting from up at the top here. If I can find it. Boy, it is rather lengthy, isn't it? Datelined in Kiev, by the way. In the spring of 2015, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko was desperate for Mark Zuckerberg's help. His government had been urging Facebook to stop the Kremlin's spreading of misinformation on the social network, to foment distrust in his new administration, and to promote support of Russia's invasion and occupation of parts of Ukraine. To get Zuckerberg's attention, the president posted a question for a town hall meeting at Facebook's Silicon Valley headquarters. There, a moderator read it aloud. And I will say this, he could have done a better job formulating this question, but I guess English not his first language. But, Mark, will you establish a Facebook office in Ukraine? The moderator said, chuckling, according to a video of the assembly. The room of young employees rippled with laughter. But the government's suggestion was serious. It believed that a Kiev office, staffed with people familiar with Ukraine's political situation, could help solve Facebook's high-level ignorance about Russian information warfare. But apparently, they regarded the question simply as, and I don't know how else it was phrased, if that was all there was to it, I don't know how they expected Americans to see it otherwise. But hopefully there was a preface to that question. But apparently not, or it was apparently ignored, because the answer makes that plain. Over time, it's something we might consider, the chief executive responded. So thank you for the Ukrainian president for writing in, because he didn't want to pronounce his name. I don't think we've gotten that one before. Zuckerberg thought he was just like promoting business development in Ukraine. Like, will you open an office here so that you can hire people, create jobs, spend money here in Ukraine? Like most people, like most elected officials around this country and elsewhere are interested in doing. But no, he was asking him for help with Russian interference in Ukrainian governance, democracy, and their elections, and invading them, for God's sake. In the 3 years since then, officials here say the company has failed to address most of their concerns about Russian online interference that predated similar interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. The tactics identified by officials, such as coordinated activity to overwhelm Facebook's system and the use of imposter accounts, are the same as in the 2016 contest and continue to challenge Facebook ahead of next month's midterm elections. I was explicitly saying that there are troll factories, that there are posts and reposts, promoted posts and news that are fake. Dmytro Shimkiv, then deputy minister of the presidential administration, said he told Facebook executives in June 2015, they are promoted on your platform by very often fake accounts. Have a look. Facebook has launched major reforms to its platform and processes since the 2016 U.S. presidential elections made the company and American users of Facebook aware of how Russian actors were abusing it to influence politics far beyond their borders. But Ukraine's warnings 2 years earlier show how the social media giant has been blind to the misuse of Facebook, in particular in places where it is hugely popular but has no on-the-ground presence. There is still no Facebook office in Ukraine. And I could see why Facebook would, well, especially if it wasn't explained to them point blank, though the second guy says he did explain it point blank. The question as framed doesn't appear to necessarily reference that explanation, but I could see why Facebook in 2015 would be reluctant, loath, perhaps, to believe that this was the case in Ukraine. You know, what do we have to do with Ukraine? And I don't know, this is all, and even if you show me the material, it's all in Russian. I don't understand it. It's just hard to believe. Of course, then when it happened here in the United States, well, first they denied it. That can't be. It's not possible. You can't use it that way. And even if it is, it's not our fault because we're just a forum for people to use, etc. And it took a couple of months for Facebook to come around to giving lip service to the idea that something was wrong with the 2016 election, that they may have had something to do with facilitating that. So there was no way they were going to come to that realization on behalf of the Ukrainian government. But Facebook, of course, wasn't the only one that had gotten that warning. Now, this is not in the article, but you and I remember, because we've discussed it extensively on the air, we remember that House Republican leaders, Kevin McCarthy, Paul Ryan, others who were present, I can't even remember, but also reported by the Washington Post. This story is in the Post in cooperation with PBS Frontline. But Washington Post got a hold of those transcripts or the tapes secretly made of the Republican leadership in the House acknowledging, because it was no secret, not among them, that this was happening, but indeed expressing real concern about it and saying, yeah, what's happening here is maniacal and evil. The Russians are manipulating the elections in the Ukraine right now. We heard all about it. I just met with the Ukrainian guys, and so did you. It's horrible. What's happening there is really frightening, scary, outrageous. And then after a little while, or it's at that point the most famous part of the discussion comes up, is that Kevin McCarthy at that point says, I think Trump and, was it Rohrabacher, right, are on the Putin payroll. And then they all laugh, and and it's nervous laughter, I guess. And then, of course, the whole session concludes with Paul Ryan swearing everyone to secrecy. There's the step that's not explicit there, is he's smart enough to not say, well, listen, the Russians are doing this to Ukraine, and they're doing it here too. And the thing is, they're doing it here, but they're doing it for our benefit. they're doing it on behalf of the Republican Party, and so therefore we are all going to swear ourselves to secrecy and not talk about it. Keep it in-house, keep it in the family here, so that we can reap the benefits of this in the next election. He doesn't say that, but there's really very little else that you can conclude from a discussion that includes everyone acknowledging how bad Russian interference is as a concept, everyone acknowledging that they had heard from the Ukrainians that they were doing it in Ukraine and all over Europe, and then a tacit admission that it was beginning to happen in the United States, and that they all thought Trump and Dana Rohrabacher were in on it, which is amazing. And then, but seriously, let's keep it quiet. That's the incongruous part. So, I mean, I guess probably the rest of the article will tell us a little bit about the kinds of tactics that they are using and others who saw what was happening in Ukraine. I just wanted to point out that it's important to know, and it would have been very helpful to mention in this story, that the leadership of the Republican Party in Congress likewise got these warnings from the Ukrainians, likewise believed, or not even likewise, Facebook didn't believe in it, but those guys believed in the warning. But then they realized, wait a minute, this is to our advantage. They want Republicans to win. They want Trump to win, and they want Republicans to win in Congress so that they can keep him in power by turning a blind eye to all the ridiculous nonsense that he's about to conduct on their behalf. Oh, you mean we're going to win our elections because of this? Yes. So then it makes sense now for all of us to keep quiet about it, despite the fact that the first half of our conversation here has been how terrible it is. And one person says, the only country that's standing up to it is us. And then somebody else acknowledges, but we're not doing that. And then they say, maybe that's not such a bad thing. In fact, maybe it's a good thing that we're not standing up to it. Let's continue to not stand up to it and keep it secret. That's pretty goddamn serious. So, what else? What else do we need to add to this? I would highly recommend reading what Greg referred to. I think Adam Serwer's piece in The Atlantic, in which he lays out the direct connection between the Trump rhetoric about the caravan and the shooting. I think that's pretty plain. I think there's no other conclusion that can be drawn, but he puts it eloquently and elegantly, and so you should go ahead and take a look at that. Another thing I wanted to bring to your attention, this is kind of a longish and rambling article too, but there's a point made in it a little bit lower down in the piece. I'll see if I can find it and identify it quickly. Did I put aside the quote of it? I don't think I did, but I grabbed the story itself. This is how we radicalized the world, is a piece in BuzzFeed News by Ryan Broderick. Subheader here: on Sunday, far-right evangelical, I don't know how you pronounce his name, but we're talking about the elections down in Brazil. Jair, perhaps? Jair? How do they say that in Portuguese? Bolsonaro, elected president of Brazil. We should take note of this. The era of being surprised that this kind of politics is over. Now we have to live with what we've done. Basically, they've elected their own Trump down there now. And isn't Brazil something like the fourth largest democracy in the world? And I guess their democracy not long for this world, but well worth pointing out. And this guy is a real problem, and one of the latest in a series of people who are horribly unqualified for the job that they're taking over, but taking over this job precisely because they reject qualifications, as we have here in the United States. And I guess what this brings me to, this deserves a much longer discussion, obviously, and can't happen now, but it's starting to look like the this sort of worldwide effort that's bolstered, it's happening online and is bolstered in the real world from everything from rallies and live action trolling, whether of their own demonstrations, putting on their own demonstrations, large scale, small scale, anything as big as Charlottesville, even, or this other Malkovich's failed bid to put on a protest in front of the White House, all the way now up to and including actual terrorist attacks like the shooting on Saturday in Pittsburgh. And I'm wondering, at what point will we eventually decide that it cannot be combated solely online? Does it have to be confronted in real life? And if so, isn't that exactly what though we may or may not approve of all of the methodology, isn't that exactly what the anti-fascist protesters have been saying and doing for all this time? And how foolish would it be if we were to accept the very right wing framing, disguising itself as civility, niceness, both sides, what have you, telling us, no, we need to reject the only people willing to confront directly and physically the very direct and physical component of these people's it's the same plan. To bother you online, yes. Spread misinformation online, yes. But also to be a physical presence out there, one, to intimidate you into either, if not submitting to their agenda, at least agreeing not to confront their agenda physically or anywhere else because you're afraid of being targeted and afraid of being beat up or possibly killed. Or two, it's supposed to convince you that this is something you can fight rhetorically just like you used to, and that what the old tactics of winning in the marketplace of ideas was going to be enough. And three, it's also supposed to give you the impression that there are more of them than there really are. We're constantly being reminded, and Greg is constantly correctly reminding us, that this represents a very distinct minority of people who even believe in this stuff, much less it's an even smaller percentage of people who are actively involved in generating and spreading such things, and even smaller still are the number who will show up physically. But the idea is meant to trick you into believing that there are millions of them just like this all over the world, all over the country, and indeed now all over the world in so many different countries. And this article here, the BuzzFeed, the first half of it is dedicated to showing how widespread this is as a tactic around the world that has happened, now resulted in the election of a new president in Brazil, that it was behind, this is behind the Brexit campaign, that it was behind the latest failed attempts at the secession of Catalonia from Spain, although that's been ongoing for so long. And I think, this is hard to separate the two, I guess, at this point, or certainly hard to lay the separatist movement at the feet of the international troll order. But they're certainly doing everything they can to drum it up because it's a division that exists. There's, as he points out, in Sweden, neo-Nazis trying to march on the country's largest book fair. That's something we hadn't heard about. Of course, all the things that are happening in this country, things that are happening in the Philippines, all of this is of a piece. And this is the way Russians now project their power around the world. The Cold War model isn't sustainable for them. They can't compete in propaganda. They can't compete in troop deployment, in weapons supply, in, stationing missiles. The only way they can do it is they say, it's virtually free compared to what we used to pay for these things to simply become somewhat, even just basically savvy or informed about the divisions that already exist in the countries that we used to have to pay money or deploy troops to divide or to worry or harass or harry in some way. These people have their own internal problems. All we really need to do is use the internet to give us the ability to travel virtually around the world without leaving here, to exacerbate those problems that already exist. And they're doing a great job of it. And I guess they think that over the long run, if Americans do the job of killing Americans, that just saves them lots of money. Now, this is to be contrasted at some point in the near future with the way China is approaching things. They're taking the opposite tack. They are actually sort of doing it Cold War style, in that they're spending lots and lots of money, not to foment divisions among Americans, because it isn't overt war and overt conflict that they're looking for here. They just want a tactical advantage. Seems that even though the hardware hacking story is increasingly being debunked, though it has taken on a renewed life of late, there are other more overt ways that China is financing its own war effort around the world through their surveillance and AI efforts. And perhaps we can bring that into some better focus in the next couple of days with other articles I have set aside for your enjoyment. Tuesday might be a great day for that. For now, stay tuned for Justice Putnam.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
When I say stay tuned, I mean stay tuned for stuff like this. It doesn't matter if Trump is an anti-Semite. The anti-Semites believe Trump is an anti-Semite. That's all that matters. A computer server crucial to a lawsuit against Georgia election officials, believe it or not, quietly wiped clean just after the suit was filed. That and many more suspicious stories just like it coming up next.